Once Upon a Time in America is about a former Jewish gangster who returns to his place in Manhattan, New York, after living off the grid for 30 years. And he comes back after discovering a letter from an unknown person that invites him over to a party. And when he comes back to Manhattan, he starts to have these regrets and guilt trips and memories about what his life used to be back in the 20s, 40s. I mean, the movie goes all the way back to like years. The movie goes back and forth. It goes like it starts in the past and then it starts in the present and then it kind of goes further back to like childhood times. And then it starts to come back into you know, present, it goes back and forth to tell its story. What makes this movie so intriguing is that there are so many ways that this movie could have failed with its storytelling. What I mean by that is that the movie does so much back and forth. It does so much back and forth, but it does it in a way where it almost feels like Scorsese-ish. Like I don't know if you guys seen The Irishman, but The Irishman kind of does something similarly where you know they show the present time and then they go back to tell the story about how they came to be to this position just off the bat. When you start in, it has such a style to its the way it opens up the movie. Like it starts off with these very concentrated, very careful shots of just this place, and then you start to see one of the former girlfriends from the from Noodles' life, kind of come in, and then right off the bat you realize that he's on the run and he's being hunted by gangsters. I'm not a huge fan of slow burn movies. Sometimes I am. It depends on like if the story's really really good or if the tension that they're building up to is very intriguing. But there's something about the way these shots are crafted, the way the direction is being molded. It kind of feels, I don't know, when I was watching it, I started to get this feeling of 2001 Odyssey where you're watching it and there's a lot of things happening. The story isn't really being told yet, but you're just seeing a lot of great imagery. You're seeing a lot of great perfected composite shots of the film. And I guess when I'm just watching this, I'm just so enthralled and very engaged in just how it's showing me images while telling its story without really much dialogue. Get some dialogue here and there, and then you don't get dialogue for a full 20, 30 minutes. But it's just a lot of imagery happening, and you're just so fascinated and interested about where the story's gonna go. I actually found this movie on accident. Um and I wasn't supposed to find it, and I damn sure wasn't supposed to watch it. I think I was about 16 or 17 when I found this movie. I used to go to the library a lot. My family, we didn't really have much cable, so we just pretty much watched movies all day. Either that or read a bunch of comic books, me and my brothers. And so I would sometimes go to the library to check out movies. So anyways, we're checking out these movies, you're checking out, kids' movies, Space Jam, and all that kind of stuff. And then I start to get really bold enough and really ballsy enough to start getting these R-rated movies. And, the library was kind of my space to explore a lot of the R-rated classics that I wasn't supposed to watch. And so I saw all the mainstream popular movies like, Warrior, Scarface, Godfather, Goodfellas, all of those gangster classics that I was introduced to was from the library. And I thought that I've seen them all until strolling by this shelf and then I see this movie called Once Upon a Time in America. The DVD's all dusty. It doesn't look like it's been checked out that much. It looked like it was just sitting on the shelf. And so I take it out the shelf, and right off the bat I see Robert De Niro in this movie on the cover. And the first thought was that why haven't I not never heard of this movie before? Because at this point I was a big Robert De Niro fan, and I was going on a big Robert De Niro binge. Like I told you, I've been on these gangster classics, for a while, and Robert De Niro has kind of always been in those types of movies, and I've never heard of this film ever. And so I'm looking at the movie, looking at the cover, and it looks like one of those Godfather gangster films. And so I look on the back and I see that it's directed by Sergio Leone. And at this point, I'm already a huge, huge fan of Sergio Leone. At 16, guys, like I'm not even a grown man yet, but like I've been cultured enough to understand and appreciate classical movies from all of these classical directors. I had just got done watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I haven't seen the first two films of that trilogy yet, but I just remember being so in tune with this guy's directing. And I just finished watching Once Upon a Time in the West. I'm on to this Once Upon a Time in America, and I'm just like, what is this movie? How come I never heard of it before? And it's like 3.5 hours long or something like that. I'm sold. Give me this thing. I check it out, sneak it in my pants, go home because it's already and I can't check out this kind of stuff yet. And I wait until like around 9 o'clock where everybody's asleep. My mom is asleep, my brother's asleep, and I'm just watching it by myself with the headphones on and my little tube, those miniature tube TVs, and I plug it into my PlayStation 2, and I'm just watching this thing with my headphones on, and just immediately taken away by just the originality of this film, the direction of it. Seeing Robert De Niro kind of acting something that I've never seen before was pretty interesting. And not to mention this movie was fucking bloody as hell. This movie was violent as shit. You know what I mean? It was made in the 80s. I'm like, dude. I mean, at this point, I was actually kind of convinced that this movie was more violent than shit, fucking Scarface. I mean, there was just the way the violence was being executed that it kind of took me off my toes a little bit. So fast forward, I actually finished the film, and I was confused. I was just so confused. I mean, it wasn't that the story was confusing. It was just that when you're going back and forth so many times, it starts to really, take a toll. And and on my little 16-year-old mind, I wasn't that. I guess I wasn't ready for that sort of complex storytelling like that. But I just remember, even though I watched it and I was slightly confused, I fucking loved it. And then ever since then, I watched it maybe 3 or 4 more times. And every time I watched it, I just appreciated this movie more and more and more. And I just couldn't figure out why nobody saw this movie. Why nobody talks about this movie. It's one of the most underrated gangster movies I've ever seen. Fast forward to 10 years later. I find out that there's an extended cut for this film. I swear to God, like this is why sometimes it irks my soul when people take classical movies and they just kind of they disregard them as just something unimportant, especially a movie like this because it's very underrated. This film, this extended version, was packaged up in a Walmart in the $5 pile. You guys know what that is? Like it's like pretty much this bucket where all of the older movies or maybe lesser known popular movies are like kind of thrown in there for $5. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, Once Upon a Time in America, this thing is on Blu-ray. I take it out. It's the extended edition and it's $5. $5. Give me that shit. Took that thing, went up there, and find out that it wasn't five. Now it actually wasn't $5. I think it was like what, $3.99 or something. Look, regardless, Walmart fucked up by pricing this motherfucking thing low. Because you go on eBay right now, you go on Amazon or any kind of online retailer that sells, rare movies. That thing is going around right now for like $30 to $40, $50. Seriously. And I got that thing for $5, bro. Like the disrespect. Woo! The direction of this film is flawless. It's spectacular. Every single frame feels so calculated. You can tell that this director loved making this movie. And like I said, I've already known Sergio Leone's work beforehand. Only watching a couple of his movies, so I kind of get a sense of his directing style. What makes the direction so crazy as well is that there are moments in here where he frames it in a way like it's a Western movie because he's better known for his Westerns. But there's like some scenes in here where there's like some shootouts about to happen, and he kind of like gives off like these Western tropes in some of the shots where like the focus on the eyes and the focus on like things holding in their hand and like all those quick cuts back and forth to like when something's happening. You see it a lot in the good, the bad, and the ugly, and a lot of some of the Western movies everybody knows about. But like he kind of incorporates those in this gangster film, and creates this suspense and this thriller type feel for the scene. Especially that one scene where it's at this point where Noodles is kind of grown up now. He's out of prison. He's kind of doing a job with his old friends, and there's like the shootout where the guy they try to rip off this crew from the Diamonds, and then they have this big old shootout, and so Noodles kind of runs into this chicken coop looking for the guy. You can kind of like see those shots where everything is very slow, everything is kind of steady, and he's like really just tracking Robert De Niro along, and all those quick shots in the eyes and stuff like that, and the music is like not even playing. It really just kind of heightens the thrills of those of scenes like that. Such an incredible job, man, and I just God, nobody talks about this movie. It's such a shame, bro. The movie is long, and I got the extended edition, so we're talking like 4 hours and 10 minutes, 4 hours and 20 minutes of my time watching this, and you really have to be, I guess, a cinephile to appreciate movies like this. Because I'm gonna tell you something, those 4 hours did not feel like 4 hours at all. Just such a well paced, well told narrative of a film like this, where you would think that a 4 hour film is going to take forever to get through. And I didn't sleep once at all. Out of all of the gangster films that have come out of all of the gangster films that I've seen, Scarface, Godfather, all of them, you name it. Okay. And Godfather is good. It's flawless. I'm willing to put money on and say that Once Upon a Time in America, the score on that bad boy, it was ahead of its time, bro. That score was so phenomenal. The flute, the way it comes in on certain dramatic moments or certain tense moments, that score was so phenomenal. I wish there was a way I can buy the score for a decent amount of money. Not a lot of money, because I'm pretty sure it's expensive, but for a decent amount of money, brand new, and just play that thing all day. That movie, the music was so damn good. It was so damn good. I can listen to that thing all day. I would put it up there next to The Godfather, if not better. That score was fantastic, dog. God, people missed out when they didn't watch this movie, like on me. And the cast as well. You got Robert De Niro, you got James Woods, you got Joe Pesci, you have Elizabeth McGovern. I think that's how you say her name. McGovern. Let me look. Yeah, McGovern. You got like so many just actors that you would notice and recognize kind of just right off the back, especially if you watch a lot of movies and stuff. But now I want to talk about the kids for a second. Those kids brought it out, man. Like those kids really hit it out the park. I was actually, the first time I saw this, I didn't think that I would be really too much into the kid story. But to be honest with you, I think it was just those performances that really kind of gave a lot of weight to this to that timeline. These kids were fantastic. They were all fantastic, especially the little guy, the youngest one that was in the group. I really enjoyed seeing them on screen and kind of just giving off this really authentic Rugrats kind of rascal vibe. They're all supposed to be these little punks in the streets doing things, and having Sergio kind of just tell them to do things and fuck shit up was just, man, these guys, I can tell these kids were really coachable. So I'm really glad that they got some kids who are taking the job seriously. I think my only gripe about the film, but this is literally my only gripe, like there's really nothing much I can say about the film that's bad about it. As much even when I tried to look for things. But in the intro of the movie, the beginning of the movie, in the beginning of the movie, there's a sequence where Noodles is kind of in this opium den, kind of hiding out and stuff, and smoking, getting high and shit. Yet he starts having these nightmares, and what he can't seem to get out of his head is this phone ringing. So you start to hear that, kind of in the background as to say that it's going on in his head. But man, it rings for like probably what 15, 20 minutes, because the movie is still kind of traversing forward, going from scene to scene to scene to scene. It rings so fucking long. I'm just like, okay, I get it. The phone means something. The phone, he's guilty for that phone call, or that phone call is significant to why he's in this place in the first place. It doesn't need to ring for 20 minutes. Okay. Now maybe that's just my 21st century way of filmmaking or something. I don't know. But it didn't need to ring that long, and it just kind of got a little annoying at a point. But other than that, you get over it. The movie's 4 hours long. You're not gonna think about that after it passes. Now, here's one thing I want to say about the film as well, just simply because I think this probably is what frustrates me the most about this film. It has nothing to do with the content of the film itself. Now the movie is the extended version is 4 hours long. The theatrical, I think, it's 229 minutes, somewhere like 3.5 hours or something like that, over that. And watching the film, I thought was fantastic. But the question I always had in my mind is that how come nobody saw this film? If you watch like behind the scenes, like the special features, I don't know if they're on the internet, but I know they're on the Blu-ray. What they do is they explain about how the legacy of this film was tainted drastically. And what I mean by that is that there was a point in time where when Sergio was making this film, I think at first it was supposed to be 7 hours long or something like that. And he wanted initially to kind of like split it up into two movies. Kind of want to have like a part one and a part two, both be 3 hour movies. And I'm down for that. I can go deeper into this film for a few more hours because the story I think is that good. And so what happened though is that the studio really wanted to cut the film down because they thought that people wasn't going to enjoy it, and they thought the flipping back and forth for the timelines was a little bit was going to confuse the audience and stuff. Like it's just another one of those moments where the studio thinking for the audience, instead of just maybe trusting us to kind of get it. So what happens is that they literally butcher the film. They literally take the film, cut it up, and trim down the runtime and put all of the flashbacks into chronological order. And so when they finally release the film in that version, it tanks because people hate the film. I think I remember seeing something about how they called this movie the worst film of all time, the worst gangster film of all time, or something like that. And I remember James Woods kind of like saying that he saw a review in the paper about it, really saying like this is the worst film of the year or something. And all I can do is just get angry. All I can do is just get so angry because it explains why nobody heard of this film before. Because first impressions, in my opinion, on everything, your movie has to hit it right out the gate, first thing. Because if it doesn't, ain't nobody gonna remember this shit. Nobody's gonna remember that movie. Like, there's gonna be a time where you come out with a movie and it's a box office, success. It's so popular, it's a blockbuster, all that kind of thing. Its legacy kind of stays ingrained in the culture once that happens. But if the movie sucks and nobody talks about it anymore. It's just one of those movies it's just bad and nobody recommends to it. What makes this particular movie so frustrating is the fact that this movie is fantastic. The movie is fantastic in its original form. And yet you have a studio saying, let's trim it down, and not only trim it down half its time, but put all of the sequences in chronological order against the director's wishes, and hope for the best that people love it. Everybody loved this film when they first saw it in the previews. Like, previewing the film, people said they loved it. People said it's going to be a classic. People said it's going to go for the Oscars and all that kind of stuff. But yet, when you trim it down, switch around the sequences, people are hating it. All you can do is to sit there and feel salty about it because it's like your idea sucked. And I just feel really, really bad for Sergio Leone because, he personally felt like they messed up his movie. And I agree. I'm glad my very first impression, my very first viewing of this film was a theatrical release. Because I think the theatrical release was fantastic. But if you ever get a chance to get hold of the extended version, by all means, go and see that. It provides so much context and so much nuance to the story. I mean, there's already so much in there already, but it just gives you just a little bit more, like maybe 30 minutes more of that, and makes the movie that much more epic, that much more bigger. And it's just such a shame for the studio to really just not trust that and not trust the audience to really just enjoy it for what it is. And I just feel really, really bad. Not to mention, they also said that they forgot to put some of the scoring segments into the film for the really key moments. I think that's the biggest sin. I think that's the biggest sin you can ever do. With that score, is that as flawless and as engaging and as ahead of its time that score is, for you to forget to put a piece of that in this film, bruh. But other than that, I mean, that's my little rant. Other than that, I thought this film was fantastic. I thought this film was ahead of its time, and I'm really glad that this was Sergio Leone's last film. It's kind of like one of those, going out without a bang kind of thing. Even though he died unexpectedly, I'm glad that this was his very last, feature film, because I think this film is fantastic. It's just such a shame that the studio fucked it up, for its release. But ultimately, I'm glad they released the original version, and I'm so blessed that I got a chance to get the extended version for a good price. So I'm gonna give this a 9.5 out of 10, guys. I think it's that good, and I highly recommend it. It's such an underrated gangster film, and I really wish it was getting the clout that it deserves, because it's really good. All right, guys, that's my review on Once Upon a Time in America. But make sure you check that out; it's really good. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Okay, you guys take care.